Supply chain issues have finally alleviated enough that I can get double extra hot Cheetos in the stores again. That's about all the good news that we're getting today.
Agreed.
we told you as the world keeps burning, we'd be here, and boy, have the fires been hot. Oh my god.
It's an inferno. What can you say?
Oh yeah, we got all sorts of horrible things to talk about tonight. Welcome back to the Electric Luchador Podcast. I am El Oscuro, the Electric Luchador. You may know me by some other names, and I am here with the man himself, the great Kanon.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
All right. So, oh man, what
hell on earth, right?
Yeah. Like what an awful thing for us to have to start with today. So wouldn't be the United States of America without a school shooting.
Yeah, that seems to be the going right now.
Yeah. So in Nashville, Tennessee, it was called Convent School. It's a private Christian school that on this last Monday was, attacked, I guess, shot up. Really, unfortunately, 3 children and 3 adults lost their lives. The 3 children, each of which were about 9 years old. The adults in their 50s and 60s. Now, I am, of course, vehemently opposed to any and all kind of violence. Fortunately, the police were able to stop the shooter. It's like, I'm not going to sit here and celebrate that, yeah, they killed them, because the shooter was killed on site by police.
Right.
Like I said, I'm against violence, so I'm not gonna celebrate that the shooter is dead, even though they did some truly horrible things.
Sure.
What we should celebrate was how quick that police response was. With
Yeah,
the body cam footage released, those motherfuckers went in there.
Yeah, and there was some incredible bravery on part of the police in the situation. There was no hesitation. It's incredibly. I mean, they're heroes. There's no other way to say it.
No, 100%, 100%. So the perpetrator, was a 28-year-old. Audrey Hale is their dead name. They were born biologically female, and they were transgender, female to male. They were going by the name Aiden. So Aiden Hale, 28 years old, former student of Covenant, and yeah, that's the 129th shooting this year. Like I said, luckily the police responded quick on this one. The whole attack only lasted as if, but 14 minutes.
Right. Honestly, a lot more people could have been killed.
Yes. No, definitely.
Police did an incredible job. Also, the schools, whatever emergency response training they had was very good, because the shooter couldn't find a lot of people. I think majority of the people that they shot were from it looked like an upstairs window shooting out. I can't speak. This is what I've heard and read, is that the shooter was targeting adults and ended up hitting kids. I'm not sure, because there's a lot of kids that ran by that the shooter did not shoot or did not take shots at. So that's kind of curious. Here's my whole spiel about this, is that a lot of the conversation revolves right now around firearms, which we'll get into that. But what I'm mostly curious about, and we know it exists, but we just don't know what it says. Is this person had a manifesto,
And yeah,
and that has not been released. They gave some details about it. Like, for example, we know the details that they cased out 2 schools, and they chose the school because it had less security, and that got released as a part of the manifesto that the police have in their custody. So we can speak more to that, but that's the thing that, I mean, we don't know what caused a human being to have a complete lack of empathy and decide to pull a trigger to end someone else's life. And I mean, that's the kind of, here's the thing, and I know you say that you're against violence, but I had to take a different perspective on this one. When a person has made those choices, there's only one way to stop them.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true.
That's like, as much as
true.
I guess I'm anti-violence in the sense that I don't like preemptive violence. I don't like to cause things, but I'm also one that if I was in a situation where I had to defend myself or my family, I would.
No,
So,
yeah, and
do you know what I'm saying on that though?
yeah, no, I understand. I agree 100%. It's like I wouldn't put myself or my family in danger if I was being attacked in order to spare any kind of injury or death to the attacker.
Right.
It's, it's just
Yeah.
like you see people online saying, "Oh, it's good that this person's dead," et cetera, and that's just not something that I personally can look at and be like,
Well,
"Yeah, it's
I'm not going to celebrate death whatsoever. This is an unfortunate situation,
yeah,
and the libertarian side of me is very pro Second Amendment, and this does nothing to help people within their liberty. You know, right now, I mean, there's constantly attack on every liberty that we have by larger powers, not only in this country but just overall.
mm-hmm.
And and so when these situations happen, they're tragedies, and they're very rare and not common, which is why when they occur we hear so much about it. But it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy when these, because I want to call these crazy people, they really are. Like, it takes a crazy person to be able to be like, I'm going to shoot a school.
Yeah,
That's not a normal thing.
no,
But
definitely,
when it gets all of the attention, you kind of make schools a target.
mm-hmm.
And so, and that's a tough one. Like, no matter how much, you know if I was, let's say, if I was an educator and I'd be talking to students because we'd be scared of this, I would still tell them they have a greater chance of dying in a car accident than they would, in a school shooting, which is true. Now, we can talk about other stats that have been thrown around at firearms are the number one killer of children, which is highly misleading. But school shootings specifically are very, very rare, a very, very rare way for for kiddos to die.
Mm-hmm.
It's not common. And so we can have that conversation, whenever appropriate. But yeah, it's schools are still relatively, or maybe even the safest place that kids can be.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't really like taking aggregate data because that doesn't really, sell newspapers. So, so to speak.
And that's one thing too that's really been bothering me about this whole tragedy, because as soon as as soon as anything like this happens, people just jump on it to start furthering their own ideologies. They start twisting it. They start like of course, there's always the Second Amendment that comes up
Sure.
with these kinds of things.
Right.
Uh and there's a narrative. There is a narrative, whether the left wants to admit it or not. There's a narrative where all of these mass shootings are a symptom of white supremacy in this country.
Yeah, I think that people like to throw that around quite a bit in anything. It's funny because there's a lot of sectarian opinions now, whereas if you're on the right and you have ideas on the right, then those ideas are steeped in white supremacy. If you're on the left, then you're a commie or whatever, a socialist, and it's just not that simple. There's a lot more nuance, but that is one of the misnomers that's thrown around. Or like, the Second Amendment doesn't choose a race. The Second Amendment's for everybody.
No,
And
definitely.
I especially if I lived in the inner city and I was a minority, I would certainly be exercising my Second Amendment to protect myself and my family.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the most important. In fact, I would say the founding fathers had people like that in mind. And people are like, those are just a bunch of white dudes. At the time, they were seditious to the British Empire. And then they were able to get away when they were the ones that... Because if you think about this, back when the founding fathers pulled away from England, most people around still consider themselves British.
Mm.
And they consider themselves a colony of England. And, we see how everything turned out, but it would have been quite the... I don't know. There was a lot of protections put into our the founding fathers put into our liberties to protect us from situations like that happening again.
No,
But,
yeah. No,
like I said,
100%. It's Oh, go on.
well, and it's just it's interesting. Like, there's a lot of conversation that we had about this shooter and about schools, about the current, climate around gun issues, gun culture, political culture. But the one thing that sticks to me is the fact, and I talked about the Shooter's Manifesto, but we just seem to quickly want to blame a tool without looking at the social problem of, why this is happening, or why this is happening more often than it used to.
Well, that is true, but it's also the fact that the left is so quick to blame not the individual but the demographic, because it's oh my god, I swear, like, this in particular has just been grating on me since the news of this tragedy broke out.
Sure.
Is that at almost every other mass shooting that's happened, the left is always like, oh yeah, white supremacy this, white supremacy that, etc., etc. And this is where the left shows their hand. This is where they show their hypocrisy, and this is how anyone with a working brain can see that the left, or if we want to call them the alt left, is complete and utter bullshit. They're grifters, they're conmen. It's all right, because listen to this. There are going to be people who say, "Oh no, that's not the focus of mass shootings. That's not, people don't always say it's white supremacy." According to Reuters, they say most shootings can be attributed to white supremacy. The number they gave was over 80%.
Yeah, that's just not true.
Okay. No, but here's the thing. No, it gets worse. It's all right. This is okay. Now we can argue about whether or not Reuters is a reliable source, but it is a source that people take seriously.
Are they talking about the United States or what's...
Yes.
Okay, so are you talking about 2022?
Yes.
Okay. In 2022, more than half of all gun deaths occurred because of suicides.
No, but
So
here,
you're so white supremacist is
but
that you're
let
going to kill
me
yourself?
let me read to you what they wrote. Okay,
Okay.
so
Okay.
Reuters, which people take very seriously in this country,
Right.
most shootings are attributed to white supremacy. They cite over 80%, most of which is counted among the Buffalo, New York, and the Colorado Springs shootings.
Oh,
Guess
mass shootings.
yes, mass shootings.
Okay, here's
Okay.
the magic statistic.
Now here's the thing. Um, guess how large their sample size was.
Oh, I don't even want to know. This is going to be bad.
Like, okay, so we're talking about mass shootings. Now, off the top of your head, would you happen to know what percentage of shooting deaths just in general are from mass shootings?
Well, I would tell you that, except that looking at Statista, um, mass shootings are not even reported as a separate category in violent crime because of their infrequency.
Okay, so there you go. Not even enough to be factored in
Mm-hmm.
the grander scheme of shooting deaths in the United States. Now, let me tell you this. We were talking about the scientific method earlier,
Sure. Yeah.
before we started recording. Okay.
Right.
Now, the sample size. I want everyone, out there who believes in honest statistics and, sample size of 25 murders in 2022.
And if they're talking about mass shootings, that could be just a few.
Yes.
And they might have cherry picked the ones that were race related.
And here they are putting numbers out there like, 80% of mass shootings are white supremacists and all that. I mean, you go on Twitter, anytime a shooting comes up, people on there are saying,
Yeah.
I bet they're white. Oh,
Right.
they must be, a Trump tart or whatever the hell. And now, get this. Now, Chris Brown, the president of the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence, not the one that beat Rihanna,
Right.
said, despite what the gun industry and their political allies want, attempting to find a scapegoat, and this is in relation to Monday's shooting, attempting to find a scapegoat isn't going to take away from the fact that what is causing gun violence in America is our easy access to firearms. So now that our shooter isn't someone that fits the narrative, it's a trans man, suddenly we're not talking about scapegoats. Suddenly
Right.
it's not about finding a scapegoat. It's not about, and if you look on Twitter, there are people trying to defend the shooter by saying that they were bullied at when they attended that school.
I it's crazy to justify murder because of your ideology. That somehow the shooter, because they're trans, gets the ultimate victimhood. And so even more so than the people they murdered, it's crazy to me. And by the way, I know it might be, I'm going to call it a she, call her a she, simply because pronouns are used to refer to people in respect to them. She is no longer around from a choice she made. And the pronoun situation is really funny because pronouns are used to refer to people when they're not around. And it's the whole pronoun thing, it's funny as it is, and I'm not going to go too much on a tangent here. I just want to explain myself a bit. People try to dictate how they're spoken about when they're not present with pronouns. It's silly. So since this person has now had their life ended from the decisions they made, it doesn't matter what pronouns we use. So I'll use the ones that are biologically appropriate. She, her. And Rand, sorry.
Enough. No, and
I will call anybody whatever pronoun they want to be called, especially, if someone's like, my name is XYZ, I want to be as respectful as possible. And even I'll use pronouns as appropriate as it is, but it's the most narcissistic thing to try to dictate how you're spoken about when you're not around as a uh, as a rule of ideology. It's so weird. It's so narcissistic. But anyway,
Well, and another thing too that I want to point out is that I don't support the idea of finding a demographic as a scapegoat. My issue isn't the fact that all transgender people aren't being blamed for this, because it's not their fault. This person,
no,
this
I mean,
single individual is not representative of the trans community or even the entire LGBT community.
when people do things, they're solely responsible and accountable for their own crimes. Nobody else.
Exactly. And what's pissing me off about this is the fact that these complete psychos in the alt left, we're just going to keep calling them that, on the alt left, that honestly they just hate white people. They hate white people, or they hate men, or
There
they hate
is,
both. It's they
well, there's a blatant prejudice occurring, and it's odd. We see it in journalism right now. People aren't journalists, they're activists. They're not giving us information, they're giving us spins.
mm-hmm.
And here's what's odd is that someone can be, you know, racist against white people, and they'll admit the racism against white people, but they'll hide behind the fact that racism somehow can't exist because of a power dynamic. It's prejudice plus powers is what causes racism. Prejudice
Mm-hmm.
is okay, and dude, that's a paradox.
It is.
And I don't want to be this guy, but going back, the way that you control a narrative. First of all, you have to control a narrative because you don't want you can't your narrative you need a narrative because your story is separate from the truth. That's number one.
100%.
Number two, you have to posit a paradox because you can't tell the truth. So going back to 1984, war is peace, knowledge is power, um, and ignorance is knowledge. I'm messing this up. Ignorance is knowledge. Is it love is or hate is love, and war is peace? I messed up the three pillars that are saying, but the point I'm trying to make is that they had to maintain ideas that contradict each other.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they can force that through, we're at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with East Asia.
Yeah.
And it's the case that is how you start to control people. If a narrative exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you try to convince people that no, you're not actually racist unless you are, in a you have to be prejudiced. Being prejudiced is all good. So they've accepted the fact that it's okay to be shitty and hateful. That's acceptable. Mm-hmm. You just can't do it if you're in some sort of class that is a, I don't know what they want to call a ruling class. If it's just a majority class, it's odd.
And it's not even. I mean, it's not so much a class thing. I mean, I guess if you consider race a class, because even people who are,
I'm just looking for a category,
Yeah.
Categorical.
Okay. Yeah.
Not class in terms of socioeconomic status, but just categorical.
Yeah.
They're here's the thing too. If we want to call a spade, if you're shitty, you're shitty.
Yeah.
That's it. If you're 100%. Racist, you're racist. If you're going to say shitty things about someone based on their skin color that has nothing to do with their value or their behavior, nothing to do about the fruit growing on their branches, then I don't want to fucking hear it.
Exactly. It's if you're going to see, violence on a large scale committed by one person and instantly say, "Oh, that must have been a white guy." That's black and white right there. You're racist. You
well
are wearing your ignorance on your sleeve. that is prejudice, and it's no matter who you are, that is not okay. You are no different from Donald Trump saying that Mexicans are rapists, and you're no different from any of that.
Well, and skin color doesn't determine, if you are the oppressor or the oppressed. It doesn't work like that.
Not anymore.
These are behavioral traits. And even if people are born into it, the way you defeat racism is not with more racism. And it's crazy to me is that what we're teaching kids now in schools is that, certain people, we are actually separating kids by skin color and telling kids at young ages that they're the victim and they're the victimizer. And, this person's the oppressed and this person's the oppressor. And they're actually going to generate real racism in a society where, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, racists do exist, but we're actually building institutional racism.
There's a difference between racist because you choose not to believe the truth and being indoctrinated into it.
Well, if you see a bunch of kids that are, in first grade, they don't give a fuck what each other's races are. They just want to hang out and play.
Yeah.
It's wild. And if they got any inkling of that, they got it from their parents. People aren't just naturally racist. And just like the fact that, but also those are opportunities if kids, point those things out. Those are the best opportunities to be like, oh no, it's just someone's skin color. Like that has nothing to do with their value as a person.
No,
but the thing is that
really
when we as a society are saying, no, let's say African Americans, you're only the value of your skin color. That's what we're trying to say when we're trying to go back and tell people that they are defined by their skin color. That's a bad thing.
Yeah. No,
we shouldn't 100%. Be doing that because that is actually reinforcing racism and reinforcing delineation between, races. When you have certain spaces that are, certain skin colors are not allowed to go, that this is granted, I was raised in the 80s and the 90s. I was raised in a time where we were trying to look at people's merit and not people's skin color. So I don't know, dude. Anyway, that's a rant. I know it's a little off topic, but I just had to get that off my chest.
No, I mean it's not entirely off topic because it's true. We've become just more racist as a society with all of this focus on race, dictating merit, race dictating behavior, race, like, why the fuck is my skin color on the pride flag?
Right.
That's not something that I consented to. That's not something what they're doing, and this is again how the alt left is showing their hand. They are weaponizing my skin color because the enemy isn't intolerance. The enemy is white people.
And you hit the nail on the head.
That's
what
here. It is.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. It's actually using race, and you're right. It's weaponizing race to actually make an enemy based on race. Like, it's actually fucking disgusting, dude.
Yeah, it's as dystopian a thing as I've ever seen. Like, that is fascism.
I can't disagree with you.
You see all of these people, and of course, there's it's these stereotypes that we're seeing on the internet of, people with blue hair and beards and makeup, calling everything a Nazi, a fascist, etc., when in reality it's these people who are saying, oh yeah, if their skin is lighter than this, they're the enemy. If they make this much money, they're the enemy. By the way, you can't say, these things, you can't think these things because that's bad. That's fascism. That's right. 100%. It's like Kay has said before, the left is no longer the party of open discussion. As soon as ideas become the enemy, you become a fascist. That
Right.
is it.
And it's funny because you'll see this especially of people currently on the left. They have to go straight to that. And here's the thing. People on the left are really interesting because they will justify certain actions, whether those actions are racist, like we were just talking about, because they view their own actions as principled or virtuous. And the ends justify the means. And that's the issue. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's an odd piece, but the left doesn't actually care about, let's say, let's go and talk about following the law, right?
Right.
They don't actually care about that because, for example, they will do whatever they can to break the law in order to, make criminals out of legal gun owners because they consider it virtuous even if it's unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And they're okay with that. They'll report things that might be misleading, and I'll get into that because they consider their ideology is virtuous. For example, we talked about, if you want to talk about misinformation. Well, here, let me get that. One thing that you mentioned earlier is you can tell they're lying, and I'll give you a straight up example.
Okay.
We have this lady jumps on camera. It looks like it's supposed to be some sort of thing like she's surprised us and she was like, and here's all the things I think about the shooting and this, and it's time to act and blah blah blah. And she ended up being at Parkland too with the odds. It's the fucking odds of that happening. Okay,
oh
cool,
yeah, she was on vacation there in
right,
Nashville.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. But she was talking about assault weapons, right?
Right.
First of all, a nebulous term, but less than 3% of all gun deaths occur with assault weapons. Who gives a fuck? More people are killed by hands and feet. I'm not lying.
Mm-hmm.
Over 90% of, I mean, if you look at it, over 90% of homicides or just gun violence occur with handguns, but nobody's talking about that. Why are they so hellbent about quote unquote assault weapons?
No, and
because it's an agenda.
And then it's, building on that with the exact same thing. All of these articles that I combed through getting information on the school shooting was just always, they were armed with like assault style rifles or AR style rifles, etc., etc. Now I'm not as well versed in guns as you are, but it's my understanding that to say something is AR style is sort of a gross misnomer, because isn't AR style something that's just so extremely broad that almost any gun can be considered AR style because it's more of a platform to build a gun on rather than a type of gun in and of itself?
Well, this is a very nebulous. Okay, I'm just going to go back in the history of the assault. The term assault weapon, I mean, you can go further back to Sturmgewehr, storm rifle, in World War II. And there's that background of, storm rifle, sure. But that's in the military context. The assault weapon is a legal context in the United States. Came out of gun control groups to kind of, find a nebulous term that would differentiate sporting rifles from non-sporting rifles. And so it's interesting because the term assault weapon sounds scary, but what does that even mean? And if you ask most people on the street, what's an assault weapon? They're going to tell you it's a machine gun, because their education about firearms comes from John Wick. And they think if it looks like a machine gun, it must be a machine gun, even though machine guns are illegal in the United States. or at least you can own. So the 1986 ban means no new machine guns can be created, nor can be they imported within the United States. And all the old ones need to be on under the NFA, which is the National Firearms Act of 1934. So what consists of an assault weapon right now? Now, it used to be an assault rifle is a select fire rifle machine gun that uses an intermediate cartridge, anywhere between 5.56 all the way up to 7.62.
Well, let's kind of break that down just for the people at home as to what that means.
Okay,
so when you say select fire, it means it has different modes of fire. So that could be semi-automatic, burst, and
then in automatic setting, right?
But fully automatic wouldn't be allowed after the laws that you mentioned.
Right, so fully in. To be honest, autos are very, very rare creatures within, within certain hands. For example, an HK-MP5 Sear, just a Sear, a pre-banned Sear, goes for over 50 grand.
Jesus Christ.
And every single one of them is registered. So if the government wants to go and find who has this firearm, they know exactly where it is, and a tax stamp needs to be with that firearm at all times. So they're heavily regulated. And so anyway, so select fire means automatic. Intermediate cartridges, and this is for an assault rifle. This is not an assault weapon. This is an assault rifle. Intermediate cartridges are just...
The nomenclature is important.
Right. They're bigger than pistol caliber cartridges, so your normal 9mm, but they're smaller than rifle caliber cartridges like 30
which are like
caliber
the big
bullets.
Spike bullets.
Right.
Okay.
It's a medium cartridge that has a range between 100 and 400 yards.
And just to further clarify, semi-automatic means that you pull the trigger once, one bullet comes out.
Right.
You pull the trigger again, one more bullet comes out.
But that's semi-automatic firearms are going to be 99% of firearms that are out there. The only exception to semi-automatics, pump-action shotguns, bolt-action rifles. Everything else is a semi-auto. Everything else. You can't have full autos because they're illegal.
Are burst fire legal here?
Burst fire is illegal.
Illegal as well?
Illegal as well. Okay. It's considered an auto. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and let me tell you, if you see anybody that has one of these, these things are like they're like unicorns. You don't see them out.
Okay.
The only time, like, if you go to a gun shop and they're like, you want to rent a full auto, it's because FFLs are allowed to have. They are still allowed to buy them from from certain companies that make them, because an FFL, a federal firearms licensee, has special restrictions, but those firearms can't leave their premises.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Or, special considerations and special laws. But there's a lot. That's what, like, the ATF does is, they kind of make the restrictions based on, what's legal and illegal with the FFLs. Anyway, moving forward.
Well, just
like, for example,
one more aside. Sorry.
Good. Yeah.
No, just one more aside. Now, again, with all of this alt-left posturing about gun control and assault-style weapons and all this kind of thing, if, as Kay said, if you ask someone what an assault weapon is, they'll most likely say a machine gun. The guns used during the shooting, were any of them anything other than a semi-automatic?
No.
All
semi-automatic, every single one of them, and I'll get into that. So, what makes an assault weapon by a legal definition right now, or what they would consider? Let's look at the federal assault weapons ban in 1994 to 2004. Here's how they considered an assault weapon. So it's a semi-automatic firearm with a detachable magazine. Okay. It has a folding or telescoping stock, which could reduce the overall length of the firearm. Okay. A pistol grip, which protrudes from the action of the weapon. A bayonet lug. A threaded barrel. Potential grenade launcher or barrel shroud, those pieces. But those pieces as it is, contribute to or contribute to what an assault weapon is. So if it has all those things, they are an assault weapon. Nothing that I just mentioned makes it more deadly than any other semi-automatic sporting rifle. Nothing. So let's say like Mini 14 that has a detachable magazine, sure, and it shoots a 223 round, sure. It doesn't have a folding or telescoping stock. Doesn't have it doesn't have a pistol grip. It doesn't have a bayonet lug. It doesn't have a threaded barrel. No grenade launcher barrel shrouds. That's the same gun as an AR-15. It's a 223 rifle. It's shooting the same bullets with the same magazine. But somehow that is not an assault weapon and an AR-15 is. It's fucking ridiculous. So that's how convoluted the difference between an assault weapon and not an assault weapon is. But moreover, here's the thing: this shooter, she was using a combination of 3 firearms, and it's peculiar. And I say this because they're strange. You don't usually see this. Not only could no gun control measure that currently are on the books could have stopped her from doing the shooting. Not one. She passed background checks. She had no priors. She had no record. Everything she owned was legal. Like, how you can't stop that then? In respect to the Second Amendment, if you have the right to have firearms, you also have the ability to hurt others, just like you could drive your car right into another person. Because you're driving 2 tons of steel, 60 miles per hour through time and space.
And that's way more likely to happen than for you to get shot.
Oh, 100%.
Well, more like several thousand%. But,
well, here's the thing. If we look at deaths in the United States, dying from a gun is not even in the top 10. It's not even up there.
Which is a perfect segue into this statistic that people are throwing around from the CDC.
Yeah.
That firearms are the leading cause of death in children in the United States for the second year in a row. And this is from CNN.
Right. Well, okay. We got to talk about this because this one's thrown around and they'll say it's true. But here, let me tell you this. Let me say this to you. If I told you that, well, here, how would you define a child?
Well, if we're talking about statistics and like official statistics, I would go by the legal definition, which would be kind of nebulous depending on the state. Generally, 17 and younger.
Okay.
Some states,
a child 16 to the CDC
is adult, but
in this case, is 1 to 19.
See, and that's the thing, too. That's the thing. Why is it when it comes to making all of these statistics, people are allowed to stipulate, organizations are allowed to stipulate their own definitions? Isn't that why we have legal definitions in the first place? So that these definitions don't need to be stipulated?
It gets worse than that. If they kept infants in, the leading cause of death would not be guns. It would be cognitive failure, or congenital, different diseases they could have as failures in their health. So they took that number off. So infants are not included in this number. They don't mention teenagers or adults. 18 over is an adult, but they'll take 19 over and up. And so they have moved the goalposts so it feeds into their statistic. Bro, let me show you this. I have the numbers here somewhere here. Okay. Let me pull this. If we look at the firearm deaths of children by age, it's very low for children. It's very low for early teenagers, and it spikes at 17, 18, and 19 significantly. Why do you think that is?
I honestly don't know.
So what is a good majority? I'm not going to say a majority of the overall gun violence, but because majority of our gun violence is suicides. If we take that half of all of gun violence out of homicides, the biggest group of homicides there are going to be gang violence in a few certain cities.
Okay.
You know, you've got Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, Philadelphia. In certain cities, you have gang violence. These kids are shooting each other up 17, 18, 19 years old. So they're including that gang violence in this number. And I think that's horrifically disingenuous.
Yeah, it's an entirely it's misleading because
school shootings, right, are so rare, and everybody thinks that their kids are going to die in a school shooting right now because of the way it's covered and the statistics being thrown around. It's just disingenuous.
Yeah, they go around, they say, and so there it is. There you go. The CDC, for the people at home, the CDC is very purposefully presenting these skewed statistics of what is mostly gang violence without saying that it's gang violence so that people attribute it to school shootings. They're not saying that this is school shootings. They're saying this kind of thing at a time where people are thinking about school shootings and letting, the public kind of put 2 and 2 together and make 5 all on their own.
It's ridiculous, dude.
Now,
and it's disingenuous. They're not being honest about the reporting. They're trying to get. But here's the thing.
It's 1984.
What is the right? But what's the end goal here? Why are they trying to mislead people? I mean, yeah, I would say the end goal is to ban firearms. And here's the thing that blows my mind. Why would people want less rights? Why would people who apparently don't trust the police, the lefties, think it's okay that just the police have guns?
And that's the thing too, is that it's when it came to the Trump presidency, the left was so quick to draw the parallels of like, oh look, they're doing this the way the Nazis did this, they're doing this the way the Third Reich did this, and then look what happened. What happened with guns in the Third Reich? Do you want to illuminate us on that? Since we're talking about
there
parallels.
Was a registry for firearms, and then there was a confiscation.
So,
in fact, every country that has set up a firearms registry has at some point in the future confiscated the firearms. Every single one.
So there you go. To the to the alt left people. I mean, I highly doubt any of them would be listening to us, but it's if those are the parallels that you like to draw of, oh look at this person, they're just like the Nazis. There's your gun ban. The Third Reich did it, and look what they did next.
Right, but the thing is, there's no perceivable. Can you imagine, like, registering ideas from the First Amendment? Can you imagine you'll have to have a background check for your right to a speedy trial?
Well,
can you imagine? Like, it's funny because they're trying to convince people that we as citizens in our country can't be trusted with certain liberties. That's what they're trying to tell everybody.
Well, here's an interesting thing that you mentioned, though. We do have to register for ideas. Isn't that what our copyright system is?
Well, that's to protect other people from stealing your ideas. Now, we say register ideas. I'm trying to say, like, this conversation right now, we didn't have to go through a 4473 background check to be able to talk about these ideas. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, yeah, but it's just interesting to think that it sort of is a restriction on free speech to be able to be like, okay, I
Well,
am
here's the
not
thing too.
legally allowed the artistic expression of selling a comic book about Batman and Superman as gay lovers and sell it as,
But
oh, here you go, Batman and Superman, because that that's protected as
well,
property of
okay,
DC
so we want to say that
Comics.
there are limits to the First Amendment, just like there are still limits to the Second Amendment.
No,
There's
yeah,
thousands of gun
definitely.
laws on record, and that's what people don't realize. They think that it's just in the fucking Wild West. It's just not. Just like there's limits on the First Amendment, right?
No,
And we, as
definitely.
a society, agree on what that is. For example, you could fan fiction that, you just can't sell it for money.
No, yeah, like I wasn't trying to make any point or anything. I just thought
Oh, gotcha,
when you
gotcha.
said that, it just hit me as like, no, wait, we do have to register ideas, and that's it's interesting because it's one of those things that you don't think about until you. I mean, at least I didn't think about it until you mention it, and I'm like, oh wow, no, yeah, we do have to register ideas, but
Well, but here's the thing, though. You choose to, if you have an idea, I guess you can say it's a registry for it. But what I'm trying to say is, in the situation, every idea would have to be registered,
no, yeah, and I get
and
what you
it's
mean.
voluntary.
I get what
Like
you mean,
it's
and
not voluntary. I can't go to a gun shop and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna buy this gun, but I'm not gonna go through a background check." They're gonna be like, "And we are calling the ATF and the police right now. That's illegal."
but but anyways, like it's people on the left, because and I mean, it's not to say that the entire left is this crazy alt left. The alt left, I am fairly certain, is a very small, very vocal and influential group on the left, and the rest, people are just sheep. It's
Yeah, well,
for
that's the
for
thing. When you have statistics go around saying that guns are legal and cause the death of children, people are like, "Oh shit!" And I, there's been at least 4 or 5 people I've talked to just in the last 2 days about that statistic, and I've had to calm them down. And when I explain to you explain not to you, but just to them, the fact that it's between 1 and 19, and infant mortality is not counted there because it would be, 4 or 5 times higher than any of the other pieces. And while we're looking at firearm, like all that gang violence is included in that piece. And here's the thing though, but no piece of gun control would have stopped this shooter, number one. Number two,
mm-hmm.
criminals already don't give a shit about laws. A criminal's not going to be like, well, I'm limited to 10 round magazines because that's the law. I'm going to go shoot some people now. Like, they don't give a fuck
and
because they're
here's
criminals.
and here's the thing. Now, these all three of these guns that the shooter used, did they all use the same ammunition? Nine
No,
millimeter.
and this is what I think this is one of the more interesting pieces as well, because I'm kind of a firearms enthusiast. And so I
Mm-hmm.
had to look up what these firearms are. And this one's odd, I'll be honest. This is the exception to the rule that proves the rule. Um, a lot of this, the fact that it's a woman shooter, that's not common at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very uncommon. But she just proved that no amount of gun control would have stopped this, like at all.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the only way you stop a psychopath that is going to commit violence against you or others is with violence. And I hate to say it, but there's no other way to stop somebody like this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
I'll
I
get
mean,
back
yeah,
to that.
that's
But
that's they prove that. They
right,
prove that
exactly.
too.
That's it. The exception that proved the rule. So check this out. 3 firearms.
Okay.
They had an AR pistol, and the AR pistol is interesting.
Not even a
Because they're
fucking
called
rifle.
assault.
An
Well, they're
AR
calling it
pistol.
assault. Well, I think there's bits here. Let me finish this thing.
Okay.
An AR pistol is an AR-15 that doesn't use a traditional stock, and because it doesn't use a traditional stock, you can buy an AR. So we have definitions of what makes a rifle and a pistol. Technically, if you create an AR style weapon that doesn't fall under the rifle category, if it just has a buffer tube that's not meant to be, used any other way, it's technically, by the definition that Congress has voted on, a pistol.
Okay.
And so there's a pistol brace situation that's happened, but it had a pistol brace on it and a shorter barrel. Whatever, doesn't matter. The shooter didn't seem to use this much, even though they had it. What the firearm they used majority of the time was the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, which is just a fucking shitty firearm. Like, it's unbelievable. The barrel's glued on to the frame. I can't make this up. It's the kind of firearm you get in the game Cyberpunk that's made in a vending machine. I'm not lying.
It's the one that's all taped up with like the long magazine and the.
Yes,
the one. Okay.
Yes. So that's a 9mm break action. It's not break action, but it can fold in half. It's just a semi-auto, and there's no real. There's no limit to this firearm. It's not an assault weapon. It's not a pistol. It's just a sporting rifle. That's really all it is, and it's a weird one.
Yeah,
and then they had.
Sorry, go on.
A Smith & Wesson Shield Easy, which is Grandma's version of a pistol. It's so weird. And here's what else is weird. This person has customized all their firearms.
Yeah.
So they had stickers. They wrote their name on the AR. And so it's weird. Usually we don't see people that do things like this have like personal touches, because that makes them look more like a person. So it's weird.
To me, I wouldn't say this would humanize them. I feel like this just makes them look even more like a psychopath, because if you're talking about someone putting, fun little stickers, and I'm looking at pictures of the guns right now, fun little like pink symbols and stickers and writing their names on their guns, what that makes me think of is Gomer Pyle whispering to his gun in Full Metal Jacket.
Well, here's the issue, though.
That's not...
Because a lot of people customize their firearms, but usually what that says is that they have something to live for, right? They're not... Every other of these mass shootings, person buys the gun and it shoots up whatever, and the gun doesn't have like these personal marks to it. And granted, that's just... There's no database on what I'm saying besides the fact, anecdotally speaking. But it was just odd to me because it looked like this person had a bit of personality, and what they're writing on there wasn't like inflammatory. It wasn't messages like the fucking shooter in New Zealand who had all like the racial messages on their guns that was meant to be in the Twitch stream. These are like personal touches, personal stickers, names, stuff like that. And it makes you think, what happened to this person where they felt like this was a legitimate option, murdering a bunch of people?
Well, here's the thing, though. I have to disagree on that, because this personalization is extremely haphazard and really kind of there's a word that I'm looking for. It's sloppy, but it sounds a little scarier than that, because yes, personalizing a gun,
like chaotic or something,
that's a normal thing to do. People want to put custom grips on their gun, or they want to have their name or their initials etched on it, and that's fine. That makes sense. This is a difference. Like, looking at that kind of customization and the customization that this person put on their gun, like, they taped a damn sticker on here. They didn't even stick it on properly. They taped it on. It's the difference between someone starting a journal because they want to try to organize their thoughts, et cetera, and kind of chronicle their lives at that point, and the fucking Joker scribbling in his notebook about all the weird shit that he's thinking. And that's really kind of the crudeness of
right, but we're also just speculating
the customization. No, 100%.
Right. 100%. It would be interesting because this person did leave a manifesto. They gave their reasons, and so I'd be curious to see what that is, and I wonder if we're ever going to find out.
Here's the thing. I'm kind of the idea of a manifesto, I don't know if I 100% believe that it exists, because it's something that I didn't hear about. Not to say that, oh, if I didn't hear about it, it didn't exist, but I combed through several articles and news stories and the like, gathering information for this podcast, and it wasn't there wasn't a single one until like updates that were released today that mentioned any kind of manifesto. They mentioned that they kept detailed notes and maps of the school that they had drawn themselves, but I don't know. It seems convenient is the wrong word. It's like every famous shooter had some kind of manifesto, had something that we could read afterwards. And I don't know, when it was mentioned for this one, there was just something in my gut that was like, I don't know if that's kosher.
Well, I'll tell you this. Are you talking like conspiracy theory style stuff?
Yes.
This is the one thing that kind of got me. Not only this lady that seemed to have some airtime, they showed her and she was like, it's time. And she straight goes to the politics of it.
Yeah.
Not only did that throw me off, but what threw me off was the fact that the very next day, last week, there was the ATF got just destroyed by the oversight committee in Congress, and there was going to be a vote to end the planned pistol brace ban in the House.
Interesting.
And the very next day, or the very day before that, there's a mass shooting using a pistol brace AR, even though I don't know if the pistol brace AR was actually used. They had it. And not a lot of crimes have used braced firearms.
And that's the one that the shooter just leaves hanging on their side the whole time.
Right. They're using the sub 2000 majority. To me, if we want to take that geopolitical perspective and that aggregate information, if we really want to pull that all together,
yeah,
what that tells me is that someone didn't want that vote in the House to occur.
Holy shit. Okay.
The very next day, I'll get you some information about that.
See, and it's very telling too that kind of thing doesn't readily pop up in the relevant news, even though it is also a gun control issue.
Yeah.
That is wow. Okay. So the day before they're about to vote to end this talk of a pistol brace ban. A pistol brace ban.
Right.
The day before the vote, this shooting happens.
Yep.
And not only does the perpetrator have a pistol brace, they don't even use it. They just have it there.
Right.
Almost like a prop. That makes it look like it's just a prop, just so that they could say, oh, they had it, but they don't even use it because it's probably the least effective weapon in their arsenal, probably.
Well, it's interesting because a pistol AR is not an efficient weapon. The ballistic coefficient coming out of a short-barreled AR is significantly hampered because it doesn't have enough dwell time in the barrel to really pick up speed. And it's horribly loud, and there's a lot of concussion to the shooter. They're not efficient weapons at all. So having a longer barrel actually makes sense for AR-15s. Not saying they should be illegal, but this killer might have been more efficient if they didn't have a pistol AR. And it's just, to me, I was like, oh, of course, when I heard this.
Wow.
And so, yeah. Do you want me to give some background on the whole pistol brace situation?
Yeah.
Okay. let's talk about that real quick, because I guess in this case it could be relevant. So, about 10 years ago, there was a man at a company. He started a company called SB Tactical, but he was taking his friend out, who was an injured vet from the Global War on Terror, and he, if I remember correctly, he only had one arm. And because he only had one arm, he couldn't shoot AR-15. So his buddy was like, okay, I'm going to create something to help you shoot an AR-15. And so what he did was that you could always buy AR pistols and have the short barrel rifle without registering them as short barrel rifles. So let me start that. Let's go all the way back to 1934. In 1934, a lot of lobby groups were lobbying Congress, and they wanted to ban pistols, right? And so they had a pistol ban in place. And they were going to vote on it. They didn't have the votes. Well, let me get back there. So when they had pistols, they said, what's going to keep people just, because we want to ban pistols, what's to keep people from sawing off the barrels of rifles and sawing off the stocks of rifles and just using those as pistols instead? And same thing with shotguns. And they're like, well, okay, I guess that's a loophole, so we're going to add this piece into the banning handguns thing where you can't have short barrel rifles or short barrel shotguns either. You can't have anything small. Well, as you know, and still to this day, pistols are very popular among common folk because they assume that that's somehow, I guess, less dangerous or whatnot. Yeah. But that would be too far to ever ban pistols. And so the only way that the NFA could pass was if they took the pistol piece of it out of it. However, this vestigial loophole was left in. So short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns are illegal. However, somehow, but pistols are totally fine. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
The reason that they wanted to ban short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns is because they technically could be pistols, and if pistols are banned, then you couldn't have those. Now, pistols are okay, but for some reason, short-barreled rifles and shotguns are not. It's stupid. Because they're talking about concealability.
Yeah.
And like I said, 90% of all homicides, or just gun crime, period, are occurring with pistols to this day. So it was silly, but it was left in. And because of that, if you wanted a short-barreled rifle or short-barreled pistol, and this would be, for example, if I want to buy an MP5 or an MP5 style firearm, because the MP5 generally has a 8-inch barrel that's less than 16 inches and it's considered a short barrel rifle, I'm not allowed to have it. Okay. For example, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so it's ridiculous when shoulder fired 9mm have such a utility for the common person for defense, and you're saying that people can't have these. But anyway, what this gentleman did is he built this brace to put onto the buffer tube of an AR-15 that the pistol, because you can produce an AR pistol that doesn't have a stock. It's just really uncomfortable to shoot. But you can sell any pistol you want. So people are doing this. But when you had that brace, you could fire a brace and hold an AR-15 with one hand and shoot it. So if you have some sort of disability, that helped.
So is the brace like a reinforced like wrap that wraps around the forearm?
Exactly. It wraps around your forearm. You can use it against your cheek. There's a lot of different ways you can use it. You're just not supposed to shoulder it.
Okay.
However, so this guy that runs the company SB Tactical contacted the ATF and worked with the ATF to develop braces that would be okay to sell.
Okay.
And so they were sold, and you're told you're not supposed to shoulder it, but legally speaking, the ATF cannot come and say something that's a brace is now redefined as another thing that it's not, because you can't have any nebulous situations in legal matters.
Right.
Whether it's either a brace or it's not a brace. And so as long as it's a brace, it can't also be a stock. So people found out that you could technically shoulder these things even though you're not supposed to, and shouldering it would not suddenly change it from a brace to a stock. It's still a brace.
Right.
So because of their convoluted laws for, almost 100 years ago, it left a loophole in, and people found a workaround where you could just get a brace and nobody would be the wiser because they're not stocks. And so they use
and
their
no
own
one would know that
shitty
that's how
laws
you're
against
using
them.
it.
What's up?
And no one would have any way of knowing that that's how you're using it unless they were to see you do
Exactly.
it. Okay.
And so there's a workaround. So the ATF said this was okay for 10 years. People will be going into gun shops and just buying that one on the wall that had a brace, and they would know no difference. It doesn't matter. And I'm not gonna lie, the lowest amount they think that are out there are 10 million. There's likely 40 million of these out there. And in January, the ATF has suddenly decided that all of these are short-barreled rifles. And if you don't register them by May, you are now a felon overnight. Even though you followed every fucking law that exists, you are now a felon. And that's punishable up to 10 years in prison and $250,000 fine. Just for existing. So there's going to be people that go to bed, not felons, one of these days in May, and they're going to wake up felons. And guess what? Luch, they have no idea. They have no idea they're felons. I would say 90% of people that have these out there have no idea what they have. They have no idea what they're not complying, and they could be found in some deep trouble because they follow every law. It's disgusting. So anyway, the House Judiciary Committee was going to vote on this and to nullify the pistol brace rule. And then the day before this vote was going to go into place is a school shooting. By
someone with a
pistol
brace equipped AR pistol.
Braced AR pistol, and not even one they used, as far as I know.
Yeah, and it's when you put it like that, it's just that sounds.
It's sketchy, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, and it's people can ridicule conspiracy theorists all you want, but I mean, when you look back at how many conspiracies have been proven true just over the course of history, I mean.
Well, here's the thing. If you want to look at the odds of this happening the way it did, it's
astronomical.
It's sketchy. Yeah, it's sketchy.
Now, so did they end up voting, or did they postpone the vote?
No, it's postponed. It's postponed.
Interesting. And so here's the thing. So that entire precedent of having the brace and it being allowed is based off of the outdated, misinformed law banning short barrel rifles and shotguns, right?
Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
This whole conflict that we're having in terms of like the braced pistols is the result of the backwards ass law making the short barrel rifles and shotguns illegal.
As long as pistols are available, why would anybody give a shit about a short barrel rifle or shotgun?
Okay, so it's based on a law that really has no reason to exist. That was kind of just sounds like it was just passed as like we need to do something.
Well, that's exactly what happened because everybody wanted to save face, and so both sides they wanted something, and so they became kind of the boogeyman, and both sides could say they did something. The pro-gun side were like, we save pistols. The anti-gun side said, oh, well, at least we'll get X, Y, and Z. Like I said, the goal was to ban pistols, and that wasn't going to happen. It's just the thing is that if someone wanted to conceal a firearm, who gives a shit about, like, a brace actually makes a firearm longer and less concealable.
Right.
As would a stock. It doesn't actually matter. A pistol's far more concealable. Far more concealable. So if concealability was the issue, it's a foregone conclusion because far more concealable firearms are already out there that are completely legal. And not only are they legal, it's it's just ridiculous. It's the case that, granted, you need to be 21 to buy a pistol. So there's that side of it, which I think I would be okay with the fact of 21 for all guns. That doesn't bother me.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an issue, but to be honest, criminals don't care about that.
No, definitely not. But okay, so the basis of this entire issue is a poorly thought out and shoddy, no pun intended, pitiful excuse for a law.
Right.
And then
here, let me give it to you here too. To own one of these, they didn't say they'll make it illegal. They made it a tax to own one of these, and the tax was $200 in 1934.
Damn.
So that's $5,000 today. And so they'll say, we didn't make it illegal. We just made it,
illegal for poor people.
Well, right. But what they didn't count on is that as time has gone on, the $200 tax stamp is actually incredibly feasible. So a lot of people are getting firearms and registering them. Now, the issue is that they're going back on their word and they're making. So here's the problem. The Supreme Court has found that if a firearm is in common use, it is not. I want to say there's a term, but something odd and unusual, something like that. If it's not odd and if it's in common use, it cannot. It is protected by the Second Amendment.
What does that mean? Common use
came out of. What's up?
What does that mean? Common use.
So this is what is a little bit more nebulous, but common use means that it came out of a Supreme Court ruling in Heller, which would have been in 2008, I want to say. And if a firearm is in common use, as in, well, here, let me see what I want to say it was Scalia that had it.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see his actual words.
Okay. Well, while you're pulling that up too, I just want to point out, just to further point out the unconstitutionality of banning the pistol brace or anything like that, is that the pistol brace, as we heard from Kay just now, was created in order to help a disabled veteran be able to fire a weapon. I mean, whether it was for sportsmanship, for leisure, or out of self-defense, them being able to fire a weapon is them being able to fire a weapon no matter what the context is. And if this ban were to go into effect, I mean, that's just a big fuck you to crippled veterans who don't have the physical capacity to use those types of pistols.
Right. So even then, too, here's the thing. If you actually are trying to ban braces, suddenly are you limiting the rights, Second Amendment rights of disabled people? And that's another question that nobody is addressing, or they haven't addressed. It's going to get slammed. If it passes, it's going to get hit in the courts. But it's posturing. Okay, so Heller, Scalia took words from U.S. versus Miller, and they set up a common use test. And so they want to take the framing of the Second Amendment from the time it was written. They're I want to say it's originalists, or there's a term for it. Again, I'm not a law or legal person, but anyway, there's a common use test is that if the common man that needed to be in a militia, what would be the common arms at the time, and a pistol braced AR would be in common use now. I want to say they found tasers in common use, and there was less than 8,000 of them out there.
So basically, it's the kind of gun that if you were to take it outside, no one would be like, "Yo, what the fuck is that thing?" It's
Right.
something that's recognizable. That's like, "Oh,
Was it
okay,
in common
yeah,
use by forces in which a well-regulated militia would be expected to compete?
okay."
And so there's a common use test by saying that, okay, is this a common rifle that Joe Schmo would bring to show up for the local militia?
Then yeah, then I mean, if the numbers that you're citing, that possibly upwards of like what was it you said, like 40 million of these guns out there, so like
Yep.
possibly,
Yep.
I would call that pretty fucking common.
Even the low number of 10 million is extremely common.
Yeah, so then either way, that would make it protected by the Second Amendment as per the Supreme Court's ruling, unless they overturn that.
Well, they just it's not going to be overturned because of the current courts, and they just made a landmark ruling in New York versus Bruin, and in New York versus Bruin, well, let me get you. Hold on. Let me get a nice little summary of that case, and all other cases right now that are kind of being considered
Mm-hmm.
have to be reconsidered. So, with Bruin in mind. Now, so what New York versus Bruin did was the case was that New York had they were sued the state because people were trying to get concealed carry permits, and basically, here's the thing. So New York's proper cause requirement, this is actually from the Supreme Court. New York's proper cause requirement for obtaining an unrestricted license to carry a concealed firearm violates the 14th Amendment in that it prevents law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And what's interesting about this is that I think it was a story of a woman who would be walking around in bad parts of New York, and she was scared, and she tried to get a permit and she couldn't, so she sued.
Okay.
And she won it was seen as unconstitutional 6-3, and even that it
Unconstitutional to deny her the permit?
Right.
Okay.
And so basically what that means is that from a Supreme Court's point of view and interpreting the law, it's going to significantly expand the scope of the Second Amendment, and handguns are seen as something that people can legally carry in public without a permit, and yeah, it's gonna be so. It's going to be interesting because if they need to look at, basically, it's the burden of proof now is going to be on the anti-gun lobby to try to prove that somehow the Second Amendment doesn't cover these things, and it's just it's just not going to happen.
True. And even then, it's when it comes to the idea of just like, oh well, guns just encourage violence, like if, because I'm all for open carry, concealed carry. I don't give a fuck. You do you, like,
mm-hmm.
you want to carry, you fucking carry, go for it. It's, people want to say like, oh, it's going to be like the old west, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, to use an example that's a little more recent, would you mind repeating why between the two schools the shooter on Monday cased out why this one was chosen over the other school? Would you mind repeating
Yeah,
that?
this was interesting. The shooter specifically said they picked out this school because it had less security. It was a soft target, and
There you go.
they were watching the whole thing. But this is when I come back around, and I hate to say it, but the only reason in a society where people have, you're always gonna have murders, but the only way to stop a murder in the midst of murder is to use violence.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. No gun control law would have stopped that, and that's why we don't hear about. Remember the statistic that we brought up, that between, I want to say it was 400,000 and 2.5 million defensive use of firearms are used every year to stop crimes.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hear about that, and the number is a little bit more nebulous simply because people aren't a lot of times willing to talk to the police or claim that they pulled a firearm in somebody that was breaking the law, because they don't want to get in trouble too.
Right.
Usually if those things end. So it's a subjective number, but the number is it's high. It's far, far, far higher than the amount of homicides. So
yeah, I mean that's plain numbers right there, plain black and white, not just from statistics, but from the mouth.
Well, the CDC had another too. A lobby group came and wanted them to change it, but it was seen as legitimate data for 10 years, and everything's political now, so it's hard to say. But in the end, if we want to look at it philosophically, why wouldn't we want more liberty? And even if let's say, even if the case is that there's psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists out there that want to hurt other people, that's going to exist in any society.
Yeah.
I want to say, let me look this up. I want to say hold on, the largest mass murder in U.S. history. And I don't know if it might have been a car. Let me see.
No, I mean people have been crazy. We've been killing each other since before, like since back when we were still apes. That's, Jack the Ripper didn't have a gun. It's
right.
not, it's, you would think from the way people like to talk about it that violence was invented when guns were invented.
Right.
And you can crack open any history book and just see that that's not the case.
Right. Well, people have always wanted to hurt people. It's in a small number, but there's always bad actors out there that are going to make decisions that are going to hurt other people.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing too. I'm one that, and this is my philosophy about firearms, period. I compare them to cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a car that sits in the garage that I hope I never have to drive. But if something is threatening me or my family in the middle of the night, I'm going to drive that car. And that's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
To act like we are insulated from violence or instability as a society is naive. We could wake up tomorrow with an EMP has gone off, and suddenly it's going to get real.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, and hopefully it doesn't in my lifetime, but we are just a hop, skipping away from really bad things happening.
I mean, we always are. It's, even if it isn't something, worldwide, there's always, you never know when someone's going to try to, take your wallet while you're walking to your car when you get off work, or try to force their way into your home, or anything like that. It's, in the United States, even all of these crazy alt-left people who think that they're literal slaves in the antebellum South, live in such a place of privilege here in the United States.
100%.
If you compare us to other countries, we're not very violent as a country compared to, like, I mean, El Salvador.
Right.
I mean, just Mexico, even. Just Mexico. I mean, you can't even go down there with, what was it, those 4 American tourists that were just swept up by a cartel, literally broad daylight, right out of a parking lot. Bam. 2 of them never made it home.
Well, and here's the thing too. People don't realize this, that one of the numbers around, but you have to look at per 100,000. And I want to say, I gotta get the actual numbers, but per 100,000, it's like 10 people die from firearms per 100,000, something like that, or less. Maybe it's 6. And when you look at it like that, that's not a lot.
No, yeah, and of course, it's obvious that number would be better off as 0 instead of 10. But when you have people who use that as their argument point, they're like, oh, well, it should be 0, so we got to do something about it. It's like, okay, yeah, but by that logic, proportionately, everything else should be 0 too. So we should still focus on the biggest contributors to deaths and then work our way up from there.
Well, and that's the thing too. People don't realize that it's still, they're talking about limiting a critical liberty about the defense of yourself against criminals who don't follow the law. Whether they like it or not, over 400 million guns exist in America. They're not going anywhere. They're not being confiscated.
Let's hope not.
Well, if they tried, there's just too many out there at this point, common use. But our country has always existed with the idea of self-sufficiency and the fact that we have firearms. That's just always been a mainstay of United States culture. And regardless, 400 million guns out there. Honestly, with as many guns we have out there, and people are not just shooting each other in the streets, it's not common to die by firearm. It's still very rare. And we act like it's this huge thing, but we're talking about limiting your rights to defend yourself, to satisfy not only these crazy lefties, but they think it would fix a very, 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 very small amount of people dying in the aggregate from guns, when most of us are more than half are suicides, which I don't necessarily, if you want to kill yourself, fine. Do you.
They're going to find a way to do it regardless if they find a gun or not.
From 94, when they had the assault weapons ban, to 2004, the reason they let the sunset on there, because violent crime didn't change. It changed nothing. In fact, it went up. And so these, to me, it's just disingenuous, and it would be like people arguing, which I guess they're doing now anyway, but for to end the First Amendment, because some ideas are too dangerous. And the Second Amendment, because some people some people are shooting others. Like that's not how this works. And I'll be honest, I don't think we have a First Amendment without a Second Amendment.
No, definitely not.
The fact that the people can leverage firearms, leverage firearms in their society, against their own government, that was the intent.
Yeah.
I mean, even, I want to say it was a Japanese General War II, they talked about a mainland invasion of the United States, and they said they wouldn't do it. And we said, why? And they said there's a rifle behind every blade of grass.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, is the fact that the way we solve these problems, because the easy answer is just blaming firearms when we're not looking at what caused a person to pull a trigger? What caused somebody to have such an issue that they thought this was a legitimate option for them? And I don't want to go towards, because it's a buzzword, but mental health. Like, what supports are we setting up when we're giving, $85 million or however $1 billion to Ukraine? We're not setting up infrastructure to protect schools and make them hard targets instead of soft targets. We're not setting up, resources for people that have mental illness. We'd rather just blame guns and just go after that. So to me, it's silly.
It's like shooting Harambe because the kid's stupid mom didn't fucking hold on to him.
Yeah, that's a that's a conversation for a whole other time. But it's interesting. I think it's disingenuous at best to somehow think, well, here, even then, with all that said, if you want to live in a place that has liberty, you're going to have to deal with the fact that people are free to do crazy things.
Yeah.
And if you have liberty, you're going to have to, you have to be accountable for yourself and for your family, because when you have liberty, there's no guardrails and the seatbelt's off. And that's okay. In fact, most people will enjoy to live freely. But the thing about that, like, here, I'll tell you what, is if it's the case that, and I think I said this earlier, but if someone's going to choose to break into my home, they're making choices for you that you didn't choose.
Mm-hmm.
And they're giving you the ultimatum with violence.
Yeah.
And so, and to act like that somehow, like,
so it's somehow the gun's fault.
Well, not only the gun's fault, but to act like that this is not a possibility that anybody would have is like, do you think that any lefties out there would be getting mugged and be like, I'm not going to call the police because that's racist or that's, classist?
No, yeah, definitely not.
It's not going to be the case. It's just people are going to call the police because they're scared.
Yeah.
They're not going to be saying one thing or another. They're not going to be profiling. They're not going to be doing any of that thing. They're just scared. And even though the police are going to commit violence against whoever else is trying to hurt them, at that point, they don't care. And so at the same thing, if, someone has, if someone's going to try to break in and hurt you, especially if they're going to have the ability to do so with a firearm because they're a free person, like this person that shot at the school had no record and bought these legally.
Yep.
You have the liberty to stop them. It's just up to you whether you want to be, one that's going to fall back and just let things happen, or if you're one that's going to take your life into your own hands. So, anyway, I don't want to get too long-winded in that, but I feel like it's a good conversation, one that needs to be had right now.
No, definitely. So,
Luch, go ahead.
So I was just gonna kind of summarize everything for the people at home. So, the day before, a landmark vote on gun control was going to take place. This person shot up a school carrying but not using a gun that just happened to exactly fit the description of the type of gun that was going to be voted on the next day. This person, being a biological woman, then trans man, doesn't fit the left's narrative of white supremacist shooting. So all of a sudden, the demographic of the person doesn't matter. Renewed cries for gun control are being sounded in response to this shooting, even though every single firearm was essentially just a single shot, or a semi-automatic pistol that was acquired legally, so no laws would have done anything about it anyways. And of course, as with every one of these shootings, no one's focusing on the victims. So to end today's podcast, thank you all for listening. This was the Electric Luchador Podcast. I am El Oscuro, the Electric Luchador, here with Kanon. Say goodbye,
Hello, and
Kanon.
thank you for everybody for listening.
With that, I want to end with the names of the victims, because ultimately, that's who we should be thinking of. Not your fucking narratives that now you can't push because it's not a cis white male. Not your fucking fascist campaign against the people, the American people's liberty, their freedom, their right to defend themselves. No. It's... This is what we should be focused on. And here were the victims of this tragedy, Okay. Evelyn Deekhouse, William Kinney, Hallie Scruggs, each of them were 9 years old. Mike Hill, 61 years old. Catherine Kuntz, 60 years old. Cynthia Peak, 61. While you're pushing your agendas and having your stupid arguments, trying to take away people's liberties and trying to push whatever race-related hate you want to push. Those are 6 families that are now incomplete. You have a good night.